How's it going, everybody? This is Top of Drabo. Hope you're having a great day, and welcome back to another video. And for the first time in over a year, it's time for another bad game review. In this series, I talk about all the games that I have from my collection throughout the PlayStations 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I find to be insanely bad. And for today, the unfortunate victim on this hit list, it is Dangerous Driving. Now, if you have already seen most of my videos, video game-wise, you will know that I am a huge fan of the Burnout franchise. It is one of my favorite arcade racers of all time. I've already reviewed Burnout 3 Takedown. That one was such a great game. This game was built to be the spiritual successor of the Burnout franchise. And, well, technically it was, but it wasn't in a good way. So this game was both developed and published by Free Fields Entertainment. They did it all, and they released it back in April of 2019, and it was headed by the two people that were responsible for heading Criterion at the time of the development of the Burnout franchise, Fiona Spiri and Alex Ward. And basically, this game is just like every other Burnout game that you would play. You basically had all of your races, your road rage, and even your time trials, but it also has a few other different modes in there as well. And it's basically the same concept. It is a world tour, and it also has 6 different classes that you have to race in. And basically, the challenge is that you have to get the gold medal in all 69 available events there is in order to beat this game. Now, obviously, Free Fields Entertainment was developing on a few other games before this one, just to test out some of the specifics and mechanics, just so that way they can build a footprint into building this particular game. And there was a lot of hope for this game actually when this first came out, because obviously, as we all know, like we said, the last time an actual Burnout game was released was all the way back in 2011. Of course, there was Burnout Paradise Remastered a year before this game came out, but obviously 2011 was the last official release of a Burnout game. And there was a lot of hope that this game would really recapture the original spirit that the Burnout franchise had. They gave it their best shot, but unfortunately, it did not turn out well. And unfortunately, one of the reasons why, it is the gameplay. I'm going to start out here with the way the mechanics work. Obviously, you know, there are a very few amount of tracks in this game, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a little bit. But obviously, you know, in regards to racing around them, especially with all the traffic that you have to go around to, it's obviously just like any other Burnout game, but for some reason, it just feels like it's 5 times harder here compared to all the other Burnout games that you have played before. I don't know exactly why, but for some reason, it feels like that there's more traffic in this game than there usually was before then, and that's usually not good. The other thing is that some of the cars are a lot harder to handle than others, and unfortunately, you don't really have much of an opportunity to be able to really work on fixing up the cars in regards to its handling, and so unfortunately, you pretty much have to do with what you got here. And some of the cars, they're just really hard to control sometimes, especially in those close quarter situations, and that just makes it really difficult for you to be able to really come out on top at the very end of each event. Trust me, in order to win, you have to have a good handling car, and there are very few of those here in this game. And unfortunately, you know, it just doesn't feel like that for some reason that all the cars that you really are racing are that inspiring, unfortunately, you know, especially when you're trying to utilize the boost and all that stuff, and considering that, you know, there are just very few avenues to be able to really try to get ahead of your competition. For some reason, this game just makes it a little bit harder than it should be, and as a result, it just really brings down the enthusiasm and excitement that this game could have originally had. Now, this is not all of their fault, but I will unfortunately give them a little bit of a failing grade for not really capturing that spirit that the Burnout franchise had in regards to its gameplay. I mean, most of the other stuff that you have in there is pretty similar to the ones like Burnout 3 Takedown. You obviously have your takedown system, obviously, and of course you have your drifts and also, you know, your ways to earn boosts and all that stuff. So some of that stuff is still there, but unfortunately, you know, it just doesn't feel like an actual Burnout game. It just feels like it wasn't really built that well, unfortunately, and you can really tell that based on how many times you play this game. The next thing you know are the cars and the tracks. Now, unfortunately, because there are 6 series, you usually have a lot more cars in each series than you would normally get. Unfortunately, for each series, you really only have just 4 cars per series, and when you only have 6 series to compete in, that's only like 24 cars. That's not good. Usually, in most Burnout games, the least you would have is at least 50 cars, or most sometimes 75 to 100. 24 cars here, that is way too little for a Burnout spiritual successor. The other thing is the tracks, obviously. For some reason, they just feel off. And really, the reason why is that most of the tracks you're racing at, it basically feels more like a forest-like atmosphere. There's no real city tracks like you usually get in previous Burnout games, unfortunately. And for some reason, even though you would really want to really feel like you're racing in a real good situation, for some reason, some of the tracks here, they just aren't built to be actual racetracks. And in fact, there's also very few of them as well. So, it just doesn't really feel like they are that good enough to really be in a game like this. And the other thing I should probably mention is that there are very few shortcuts that you can take. In fact, there's almost no shortcuts at all in many of these tracks. In fact, for some reason, it just feels a little more simplistic. It's just basically one course and then that's pretty much it. Obviously, I would love to have some shortcuts and then ultimately a whole bunch of other things on these tracks so that way it makes the races more interesting. Unfortunately, it just doesn't. It just feels like you're just turning left and right at the same exact speed for just 3 or 4 laps or something like that. It just takes all the fun away. There's also no real sprints in this game as well. Usually there would be a lot of sprints like there were in Burnout 3, and then ultimately there would be a crash mode and then ultimately some special online multiplayer mode, stuff like that. They didn't have that at launch, and unfortunately, because of all of that, all the cars and ultimately the tracks and all that stuff, it just really brings this game down. One real problem that I really had with this game was that there were a ton of bugs and glitches in this one. Usually, by the time a Burnout game would usually come out, the Criterion team would be able to really figure out which part of the game is the problem, so that way it is fixable and ultimately the players have a fun time playing this game. When I played this game, trust me, it looks like this game wasn't even close to being done. And a lot of the reasons is that honestly, for some reason, the collision detection in this game is absolutely terrible. Like usually you would be about like 2 or 3 car lengths ahead, and yet for some reason you would still get taken out. Or sometimes you're driving like that fast in a corner and you're drifting sideways, and at the very last second a car or maybe some other form of traffic will usually be right in front of you and there's nothing you can do about it. You can end up just crashing into them. In fact, there are several instances where oncoming traffic is driving literally on the wrong side of the road. That right there is a bug that should have been fixed right there, and I was shocked that that was not doable. But what really shocked me is after a takedown, for some reason, to let the car stay there. No, I don't want that. For some reason, they feel like that they want to make it a lot harder and ultimately really try to force the issue and make me drive through wrecked cars that were left behind and all that stuff. Usually after a takedown and Burnout, the field will usually be cleared and everything will be really back to the way it was. You leave those cars as a junkyard, you're only making a bigger junkyard as a result. And as a player, you do not want that. And yeah, all of those things, it just makes this game a lot worse than it really should be. Again, this is pretty much a small team, so I can't really fault them too much, but still, it would have been really good if they had really gone back and really fixed all those bugs and glitches that were there before then. And unfortunately, they did not do that here, and that really brings this game down. Then there are the graphics, and for some reason, it just doesn't feel inspiring. I mean, for some reason, the graphics in this game, it looks like that they're more of a PS3 game than there is a PS2 game. I mean, literally the way that the engine works in this thing, you always get the feeling that for some reason, it just doesn't feel like a proper Burnout spiritual successor for a PS4 game. Not only that, whenever you get a takedown, usually the cars would look like they are an absolute mess. The front and rear ends of the cars would be like crunched in between. The roll cages would probably be bent a little, and it would look like it would be on fire at times. You do not get that here. After you get a takedown, for some reason, the car really looks like it's still mostly intact outside of some sheet metal damage and ultimately the windows being bent in and all that stuff. You don't want to have those kinds of takedowns. You want cars literally exploding and going on fire and all that stuff. And that's just not good in a game like this. And not only that, most of the tracks too, when you look at some of the scenery as well, and ultimately, some of the traffic as well, it doesn't look like it's very polished for some reason. Ultimately, there may be a couple things in regards to them that may look off. And ultimately, with some of the cars too, for some reason, it just doesn't look right. I mean, I'm not saying that it's terrible. I mean, trust me, there have been games where the graphics look a whole lot worse, but unfortunately, I just don't think this engine was really all that compatible for a game like this. Now again, they're not terrible by any means. I don't think that they are the worst graphics in the whole world, but however, I do think that they don't look like they would be the kind of graphics that would be compatible for a PlayStation 4 game. Again, probably a PlayStation 3 game at best, but again, at the very least, there have been games with worse graphics for a PS4 game. Like I said before, NASCAR NASCAR Heat Evolution, the last bad game I reviewed, that was one of them. Finally, and like I just said, it just didn't feel like a real good spiritual successor. I just feel like that for some reason, ultimately, despite the best efforts of Free Fields Entertainment to really make this a good Burnout spiritual successor, it just didn't really live up to the hype. I mean, there was a lot of excitement for this game when it first came out, but for some reason, there was very little marketing and also very little good development that took place throughout the production of this game. And unfortunately, when this game came out, it ended up being a really big letdown. Now, of course, there have been some players that have played this game that have enjoyed it. I mean, obviously, there have been some people that love the Burnout franchise that played this game and felt like they had a lot of fun. And hey, I don't fault them for that. I'm sure that there's something about this game that they really enjoyed. But here, if you're trying to make a real good spiritual successor for a Burnout franchise, then unfortunately, you really would have to do a lot better than what Free Fields Entertainment did, especially when two of the people that are there at that staff happen to be from the exact team that developed the Burnout franchise. And also, what I found funny during playing this game was that in multiple slides during, the loading modes for this game, they said that they were producing Dangerous Driving 2, and that it would come out in 2020. Well, it didn't come out in 2020, and then they said that they were trying to get it out here in 2024. Well, here we are in September of 2024, and Dangerous Driving 2 still hasn't come out yet. So I'm kind of wondering if there are a whole bunch of other issues that are going on there in relation to the development of that game. And I have to wonder if it's because of all the faults that took place with this one. Now, they were a 7-person team when this game came out, and so honestly, they didn't have a whole lot of resources, and their budget was very small. So not all of this was their fault. And really, I feel like that this game does get a little more hate than it should. I think the hate for this game should have been toned down just a little bit, but still, like I said before, even when you're a 7-person team, if you're making a spiritual successor to Burnout, this should have been a better game than it was when it came out, and unfortunately, it just did not live up to the hype. Free Fields Entertainment came out and did everything that they could to try to recapture the magic that was of the Burnout franchise, try to bring back everything that really made that franchise so successful, and ultimately turn it into a spiritual successor that can ultimately outlast that franchise and continue on into the future. Unfortunately, they were not able to do that with Dangerous Driving. There were just a lot of bugs and glitches that took place during this game. The gameplay just fell a little bit off, and unfortunately, it just did not feel like that it was a real proper spiritual successor to Burnout. I mean, it's definitely not one of the worst racing games in the world, but it did not accomplish the goal that it was supposed to accomplish, which was to make an actual spiritual successor feel really exciting. And as long as they did try, and you gotta give them credit for trying, especially as a 7-person team at the time, unfortunately, they were just not able to do that. This game could have really made something happen in regards to being a spiritual successor of Burnout, and trust me, this game could have really done a lot to really recapture all of the success and magic that the Burnout franchise had, and really make this game one of the greatest arcade racers of all time. Unfortunately, it just did not go according to plan, and because of that, Dangerous Driving is another bad game that ends up in my collection. And that will do it for this bad game review. This game is one many that I have in my collection throughout the PlayStations 1, 2, 3, and 4, and there are a lot of them that I am thinking about reviewing, so I'd like to hear from you. What game would you like for me to review next? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. I'll play a little bit of it, and then I'll give you my review on it, whether or not it is good or bad. And with that, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. As always, if you'd like to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know my latest video is released. Comment below for future suggestions for all my videos, whether it's vlogs, projects, or challenges, you name it, leave it in the comments below and I'll do my best to make them. As always, follow me on my social media, all the links are in the description below. That's going to do it for this video. I hope you're having another great day. As always, I hope to see you all again in another video very soon. And if you love racing games, hey, if you are a fan of the Burnout franchise, I really think twice before picking this game up. So long, everybody.